And today I'm speaking with Andy Hall. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Tim. I am going to try to be as harmonious, though I know I'm not using that word correctly in the proper way of your channel. But I'm going to try to be funny, insightful, and funny. I know I said that twice, but I'm going to try.
I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it. For anyone who doesn't know Andy, he is a satirist, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and a writer at the Pathos blog called Laughing and Disbelief. And he also is a YouTuber at the YouTube channel Laughing and Disbelief. And he's also a stand-up comedian, which we'll be hearing a little bit of that, I'm sure, woven in. And you have 2 children. You're there near Boston. And you are also an author of an interesting book called Vampires, Lovers, and Other Strangers, a short story collection. That is a very interesting book title. I'd love to get into that eventually here. But could you tell us, too, what I'm missing there? What else is Andrew Hall about?
Chaos, insanity. Most of your audience probably has read something by me on Facebook or looked at one of my posts. I've had a variety of viral posts over the years. I've been doing this gig for about 10 years now, 5 years on Pathos. And yeah, I'm probably not very well known, but my work is. If people probably looked at it at some point and said either that's really funny or that is so stupid, I don't know who this guy is.
What's your favorite article or video? What is the favorite high point that you've?
Well, I'll do a post and then I'll do a video. I'll start off with a video first because this is just recent. I've been trying to, because I do comedy, I do talk about atheism, and I do talk about politics. So my channel is basically trying to balance all of those 3 out. And you might find this surprising, Tim, but the audience for comedy, it's a lot wider, it's a lot broader. There's a lot more people in it than the audience for atheism or for politics. And so a lot of people do come to my channel because of my funny little videos. I just did a 1-minute bit the other day about my love. And I'm going to apologize about this beforehand, but for my love of mayonnaise and salsa sandwiches.
Wow.
Wow, right? This might be the most controversial thing I've said, going to say in our interview today. But yeah, I did a funny 1-minute video about salsa and mayonnaise sandwiches, which actually got a decent amount of play on the YouTube channel.
So you actually just make a plain mayonnaise and salsa sandwich?
Yeah, well, I love those things. My girlfriend, she has these really expensive set of knives, right? And so I'm cutting my the hamburger roll, the white, Wonder Bread hamburger roll with the salsa and the mayonnaise in it. And she's looking at me in shock. And I go to her and I go, so do you think I'm adulterating your knife in some way? Am I like damaging the knife by it being near my white trash food? She goes, yes, Andy. Yes, I do. I think that's exactly what I'm thinking right now.
It sounds like comfort food, though. Is it comfort food?
It is so much comfort food. It's because there's so much that we need to feel comfortable with or to deal with in society. The virus, trauma, religion, politics. And if I want to deal with it with a salsa and mayo sandwich, I think I'm going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I noticed one of your pictures up was you at Starbucks. What's your favorite drink there?
Well, I have to tell you something. I am an old guy. So when I go to Starbucks, I'm typically there for the Wi-Fi. This is before the coronavirus, of course. I go there for the Wi-Fi just to get out of the house and do some writing. I am just a black coffee person, to tell you the truth.
Gotcha.
I am the most boring. You know what I find to be really irritating, and I don't want to be this person. I don't want to be this person who has to explain or to write a dissertation about what drink they're going to be ordering to the barista and have everyone else. This might be a little bit of social anxiety for me, but I don't want to be that person who needs time to explain what their drink is.
Yeah.
I just go up there and I go a tall, black Pete. I believe that's what I've ordered. And Pike, whatever. And it's very simple. I think that they appreciate my sacrifice to the line and to their job. So I just pay, I get my black coffee, I sit down and I write funny, or I try to write funny.
Well, I admit I am that guy. I've got a drink. I worked on it for a while years ago, perfected it, tweaked it, and it's got about 7 or 8 different pieces to it. But the good thing is if you go there, frequently enough, they're like, oh, it's you again. I know your drink. But I know what you mean. I'm sure there's some of that going on when the line's long.
Right.
I do want to ask about your story, because I'm sure that a lot of people hear your comedy, they hear the topics, and I've seen, some of your videos. You do a great job at them. But I don't know how many of us really know the Andrew Hall story. So could you tell us just where did you come from, especially religiously?
Sure. Well, I'm adopted. I was adopted at 3 months old. My parents, or at least my adopted parents, well, I just call my parents, because I was adopted at 3 months old. That's all I remember is being with them. My father was the church deacon of the Baptist church that was within, a short walk from where we lived in Brockton, Massachusetts. My mother was the church organist and choir director at the same church, of course. And so I was in it to win it. I was, the deal with Baptist, full body immersion, memorizing the books of the Bible, memorizing Bible verses, sinners in the hand of an angry God, something like that. It was the halcyon days of my childhood, which were not deeply traumatic. Okay, so maybe traumatic at some points, and due to the hands of religion too, may I say. I was always a high-strung kid. I should also mention that I have a small I now have a small disability. It wasn't so small back then. I have hypotonia, which is a low muscle mass, and so I wasn't able to speak correctly. I had to go to special school for a year to do intense speech therapy. I was on the little bus. With all the other kids with disabilities, kid with helmet, all the other crew there. And the funny religious angle to this is that my parents sent me to a Christian kindergarten. Now, this is back in the 70s, of course, and we didn't have like universal kindergarten like many areas do now. But I went to a Christian kindergarten, and thank my fictitious God, those people realized, hey, there's something wrong with this kid. He doesn't talk. He tries to talk, but the consonants just don't come out right. And that was due to my lack of muscle control and tone. Because talking, it turns out, actually takes a lot of effort and concentration if you don't have the circuitry, the neural circuitry to actually do it well. So thankfully, they informed my parents, which I don't understand why they didn't realize something was drastically wrong, because you would think if your kid can't say the letter R or the letter M at 4 years old, that maybe you might need some services. Maybe they prayed about it, Tim. I don't know. Maybe they prayed about it. So yeah,
Did you feel frustrated though, like when you were trying to talk, and I'm sure some of the kids would not quite understand your words, or that?
Oh yeah, there was no doubt that, and I think a lot of my comedy is based on the fact that I wasn't an outsider for a long period of time in elementary school, middle school, and that has stuck with me because I get to see how people treat outsiders.
Yeah.
Because I look like just every other dopey white guy now. I get a lot of white privilege. There's no doubt about that, right? People treat me in a certain way, but back in the day, I was treated like I was someone with a disability and did not enjoy the privilege that a lot of the other kids just had. And that means that if you have privilege when you're a kid, typically you don't get your butt beaten for being different. So there was. It definitely affected me, and it helped. And probably the reason why I like talking so much now and communicating is this kind of, I'm doing victory laps over this disability for all intents and purposes.
I understand a little bit about the whole feeling of being on the outside. I didn't have a disability that was as obvious to people all the time. I told you about the insomnia last time we spoke, but I was more on the outside because of, like, that whole, just that idea of the kid that really wants to study and learn versus everyone else wants to, goof off in class. Like, I literally remember even as a college student, there was occasional snippets of time when I didn't have a job for whatever reason. Usually I was working, but if I had a spare Saturday, I'd spend 12 hours a day studying my dictionary. I loved to learn. I loved to learn the origins of words. And it was like that to some people is really weird. And all through school, I was like, I just wanted to be, I didn't want to be the guy that got the A+ just so I could brag, but it's like, I really, really want to learn. And in some context, that does make you an outsider. So I know a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the great things about my parents, and they had a lot of issues, but they did give me a set of World Book encyclopedias when I was 11 years old, maybe 10 or 11 years old. And for people who aren't acquainted with what a set of encyclopedia books with information in them, they're kind of like Wikipedia, but more reliable, less likely to be updated, however. So I got a set of World Book encyclopedias when I was 11, and I would just spend hours just like randomly thumbing through pages. And that's how I spent a lot of weekends, well, besides watching monster movies, of course. But I spent a lot of time just going through those set of encyclopedias. And even now, a lot of information is still in my head from those early days of just sitting down and enjoying the love of learning. When we both have kids, and one of the things I want to, or I hope to instill, is this kind of intellectual curiosity about the world.
Yeah.
So that they become life learners.
Yeah, it's like that Renaissance person, Renaissance man, Renaissance woman kind of perspective of just loving to learn. And it's amazing too when you get kids, and I was included in this, and you get kids past that fear of, oh, people are going to think I'm a, brainiac or, a nerd or whatever. It's like, no, just learn because the universe is amazing. When you get kids past it and they just can dive into that, it is so cool to see. I mean, and to see just kids' creativity, the things that attract them, and it was cool. I remember, for me in 5th grade, I wrote this book, science fiction book, and to everyone in 5th grade is like, don't take anything too seriously. It's like I wrote like 100-page science fiction novel as a 5th grader, and it was really cool. But to me, it was like, I know it was weird, but to me, it was like I loved it. It was like this, the science fiction part of me coming out.
That's great. It's funny when I talk about the disability, and there's some anger I still have. I mean, comedy is a lot of it. Even in the most happy-go-lucky comedians, you'll see there's still like this undercurrent of anger, and it's fast to come out. We were talking before the show, and we were talking about something, and I think something just casually you said about, well, something, and I said, well, F that person, F those people. And I don't want to say I instilled that in my kids, but they definitely have if other people don't like what I'm doing, and if it's good, like if I'm reading or educating myself, then those other people can just go fuck themselves.
Yeah. Can I ask on that note, and I don't want to get too off track from your basic story, I want to get to that in a second, but one of the hardest parts for me in my journey is this issue of trying to be gentle and compassionate, patient, open to a discussion. But at the same point, there's like, come on, guys, this is bullshit. You're talking about a talking snake. You're talking about a flood. You're talking about stuff that archaeologically we can see there's no evidence for it here or there. Just so much stuff. I mean, it's endless. The sun stood still, and you're like, you get frustrated. You're like, this is stupid, and you kind of want to say, look, if you won't bring a little bit of rationality to the table, I'm not going to keep on doing this. But at the same point, then you're kind of cutting off, you're kind of shutting conversations down. How do you balance that and keep lines open? Because obviously, especially with loved ones like extended family, you don't want to just be like, screw you, you're stupid.
Yeah. A friend of mine told me this. He didn't think of this himself. This statement that we are reasonable, we are capable of reason, but that does not make us reasonable creatures.
Yeah.
So, from what I've seen of our species, people, sure, we can do wonderful things, but I think under normal circumstances, we just work on inertia, and organizations are like that too, because as we've seen in the pandemic, in this crisis, that when people actually have to start thinking for themselves, when organizations have to start thinking for themselves on the fly, we do a horrible job at it. More or less, being able to take in data, new data, and formulate new opinions from that and execute on that, that is a heavy lift for most of us, and
Yeah.
for me, it's heavy. It's like, I have a conservative bias, just like most of us do. And a conservative bias is that when you have the new information coming in, your first knee-jerk reaction is saying, well, that can't be right. And so I try to remind myself, or to try to be mindful of my own conservative bias. And when someone is spouting what in all appearances looks insane about either global climate change or wearing a mask, it's like, well, this could just be an aspect of conservative bias. So that helps temper my opinion. And to tell you the truth, as a comedian, I have it easy in a certain way. Just like in a strange way, therapists have it easy. And I don't want to be crapping on therapists, because therapists do a wonderful job. And when you're good at it, it's like magic. That's what it is. But what we do is that we try to open up these cognitive spaces and spaces for emotions, right? So just as therapy, people hear things that they would not normally hear. People say things that they think are, is unspeakable. They feel things that not permissible. And in a lot of ways, comedy is like that. You're creating a space where people get to feel the feelings that they are very uncomfortable about, and to look at ideas in a new way.
Yeah. Do you feel like that came into your deconversion process? I know I'm jumping a little bit. Do you feel like that was like, it was really hard for you to imagine a life outside of religion after
Oh
growing
yeah.
up in it?
Well, when Christians tell me that they don't see why life would be living without Jesus, without having a personal relationship with Jesus, like, I understand that. Mm-hmm. I totally understand that. That is an irrational, emotional thing that you're feeling, and that's the pernicious effect of faith, isn't it? Is that the religious institutions, they get us at an early age and intentionally create this irrational relationship, this purely emotional relationship with their institution. And so, that creates these emotions and these strongly held beliefs that's so difficult to get rid of. And it's so difficult to help other people throw off those chains.
Yeah, it's like, it's so woven in, the tentacles. Even when you get out, the tentacles, you can feel them still in you sometimes. And
yeah, and there are these artifacts from faith too, right? I think that, as the more you think about it, you more explore it, it's like, well, is the Western conception of the self, is that just a relic from Christianity, or is it more of a Buddhist-y thing, or is the self illusory in a lot of ways? Yeah. And there's definitely the sense that I get is that it's this monolithic self comes from a monotheistic religion. And that actually helps me become more merciful, or makes me care more about people if I think that their ability to make choices is fairly limited. Yeah. And that it helps me to think this is not who they are as like something carved in stone. This is just a snapshot of who they are right now at this time. This doesn't mean this is going to be the same person they're going to be in 6 months from now. And I try to be mindful of that while still making crappy jokes.
It's a lot of your jokes are really funny. I like them. What you just said, that was really profound, because that's very much where I'm at with a lot of my extended relationships, family and so forth, and some friends. It's like you want to basically see them in the best light possible, almost like a biblical. I don't hate to borrow from a biblical concept, obviously, but you love hopes of all things. You hope the best for them. You hope that at some point they could escape, and you don't want to see them only in the concept of this, what I call the Bible prison. You want to think of them as just a normal person that might someday escape. And I honestly think too, a lot of it comes down to just the luck of the draw, so to speak, of when you get exposed to information. Like a lot of the stuff that I, for example, came across from my deconversion, mm-hmm. How should I say it? I just didn't know where to look. I didn't know that there were things I needed to study. I didn't know there were other aspects of the origins of Christianity that I just never heard of. And if you truly don't know that you don't know, just you're truly ignorant. It's like you're not ambivalent. You're just totally ignorant. You don't know what you might need to study. And if you just go through life and no one ever tells you, hey, did you actually ever study this and that?
Yeah.
You just, and I feel like, I honestly, I deal with the frustration of that, of like, I know there's some Bible college teachers that must have known some of this stuff and never said anything. But anyway, that's a different subject. Could I go back to your story here? So you're growing up with the speech thing. How long did it take you to get over that? And then could you bring us back to the Christian context? Were your parents Christian and all that?
So I went to the special school for kindergarten. Once I got into regular elementary school, I was in pull-out classes several times a week, in which I would meet with the voice therapist, and we would go through just the hard work of, pronouncing R's, pronouncing M's, and just going over and over again. And eventually, due to the therapy and the practice, now I just speak like every other Boston native. As horrible as that sounds.
Yeah, but the Boston accent's cool. I like it. It's funny you say that. I think you said the R's. I took Japanese for 2 years, and my Japanese tutor would always switch, I think, the R's and the L's, and we used to have a laugh about that. Certain words, they just couldn't say them the way we did.
Right. So I remember from my early church life when I was in Sunday school, I always loved, remembering the Bible verses for next week. I got they had kind of this incentive program for learning the books of the Bible. And so I learned the books of the Bible, just recite them, which I think I can recite most of them today, though that was I'm 52 now, so that was well over 40 years ago.
Did you do the Awana stuff and like, what do you call it? The Vacation Bible School kind of thing?
Oh yeah, well, Vacation Bible School, come on. How could any good Christian parent who doesn't want their kid around the house not send them to Christian Bible School? That was also a joy. And the thing is because I hated the outdoors. Because I fell down a lot, because not only did the disability impair my speech, but I couldn't move in space well. So it took me an exceptionally long time to learn how to ride my bike. I fell down a crap load of times. My ankles are razor thin. My wrists are razor thin. So I have all these weird physical idiosyncrasies. And after falling down, I might have not been the smartest kid in the world, but I realized that outside I fell down a lot. And there were bees for some reason. I don't know if it's because of cartoons that I was terrified of bees, but I remember having these discussions with my mom about, I'm not going outside because there are bees outside. And she tried to talk me down. So she would get me to go outside, to walk to Vacation Bible School, for example, and to walk at the local library. So I could walk down the library too. I found the library much more satisfying than
so you're more of a homebody kind of person, it sounds like.
Oh yeah. When you talk to most writers, people who do writing, there's a saying in Hollywood, you can always tell the writers because they're the palest ones in the room. And that's because we just like being inside. We like doing the work. And outside, or other people, we're introverts typically. And so even mixing with other people, it can be a lot of work for us. And just going outside, like I said, especially with my disability, it was one of those things that, I'm not going to fall down in my house.
Yeah.
More than likely, I'm not going to turn my ankle. I'm not going to blow out my ankle, probably in the house. So yeah.
So you're an introvert then, it sounds like.
I'm an introvert that can fake being an extrovert.
Yeah.
But actually, doing YouTube has helped quite a bit. I used to be a co-host for the Naked Diner podcast. We talked to all kinds of people. So just doing this has helped me learn how to interact with normies, with normal people, without me sounding like some kind of left-wing lunatic within 2 minutes. When I drink, it might be like that when I'm out in public. But most times I can ask them basic interview questions without making it sound like I'm interviewing them, or I know when to not shoot my mouth off. So that helps quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the introvert side to myself. I'm learning, like you're saying, to balance that. But if I'm with a group of people for a while, I feel like I need to recharge my batteries at some point. But which is interesting when you're having family full of, got four little kids here. I'm like, when it comes to 9 o'clock at night or something, I'm like, all right, it's time to decompress. But
Right.
so with your parents, they were believers?
Oh yeah. They were like super believers.
Oh, really?
Uh,
Okay.
my dad, he was a Methodist growing up, and then when he met up with, his wife, my mom, he turned Baptist. He never drank beer.
Hmm.
He drank a bit of beer before he met her, but then he gave up beer for Jesus and my mom, I guess. Probably decisions that did not really help him in the long term.
Yeah. It's amazing how that works.
And he was in Korea too, in the Korean War, and so he had this interesting, I mean terrifying, set of personality traits that melded together religiosity, PTSD from Korea, as well as he was probably on the spectrum too a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so all those kind of really melded together into an explosive household in a lot of ways when I was growing up. So we were religious. There was just this kind of casual violence. My sister was also adopted from another birth family. I talk about that. I have a couple of stand-up jokes about that. I'm not going to get into them now. I'm not going to do the act here, but I had a couple of funny stories about that. So she was from another family too, but she was adopted when I think she was like 2 years old. So much, later, developmentally speaking, that's much later, at 2 versus 3 months. And she had a host of problems too. She was, and I would say clinically a sociopath. And so my dad, who had PTSD and religious, I sound like it's a Dropkick Murphy sign, to tell you the truth. I'm not acquainted. I'm not sure if you know who the Dropkick Murphys are.
No, it's an interesting concept, an interesting term.
Yeah, it was named after actually a detox center, Dropkick Murphys. But I digress. So my dad had this PTSD and religious, and a bit spectrumy, and my sister was a sociopath and there was a couple of different ways how this manifested. She was always seeking stimulation, had poor impulse control, liked to get into fights. And my mom, borderline personality disorder. And my ex-wife, who I was married for 20 years, was actually a social worker. So this isn't just stuff that I came up with myself. I had a licensed clinician talk with me and my ex-wife about, oh yeah, Andy, yeah, you're not off base on this. Just a nest full of personality issues going on with that family.
So you faced a real uphill battle of some of these things. I'm just curious of your perspective, in terms of religion. I've had some people ask me this question. I've thought about it before, and I just want to ask you: do you feel like there are certain personality traits, especially people who have some version of a mental issue, or some kind of developmental issue, where religion is a little bit more attractive to them, where it's just somehow it just fills the need a little bit better than maybe to someone that's otherwise, at least on the outside, doing good, being healthy?
Let me broaden this out first and then get into the specifics. I think in general, for any personality trait, there's some kind of bell curve distribution, right? So I think that's true for religiosity, to tell you the truth. Some people just are more attracted to it than others for whatever reasons, right? And some people aren't. Like my girlfriend, who I love in 2 years, just had 2-year anniversary with her. She was never religious. Her parents tried to indoctrinate her into Catholicism, and it just never took. She realized from an early age that nothing's there. There's nothing whatsoever. And then you had someone like me who was like, yeah, this feels right, and aspects of it still feel right in many ways. So you have that kind of regular bell curve distribution. At least this is my personal hypothesis. Yeah. And then specifically, my sister seem to be a typical person, a typical type who makes a hash out of their lives, right? Make all kinds of bad decisions, one after the other, and then they find Jesus.
Hmm.
And that helps them manage themselves and their own behavior, because a lot of the time sociopaths they can't regulate themselves too well, so they need to have some kind of external set of rules or authority figure coming in to help them become adaptive.
Yeah.
And for to do the least amount of harm. We'll say that. So definitely you can see that with my sister. With other people like my folks, I think religion offered them a blank check to do whatever they wanted.
Hmm.
It's like, this is what Jesus says is okay. This is what my church says this is okay. So I don't have to question any of my sketchy behavior. And it was a very narcissistic type of faith that they had.
Yeah.
And I think that for some personality types, that's what they cling on to. It's like, oh, I just have to ask for forgiveness. Or like I said, the Bible says it's okay, spare the rod, blah, 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 child, spare the rod, spoil the child kind of stuff. And that just gives them license in their minds to do bad things.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of people too, at least in my experience, where the whole ultra conservative slash strict church and school and home environment, where just like, as long as you've got a black and white set of rules in your rule book, you can do this, you can, like you mentioned the beer, don't drink beer, but you can drink, this, coffee, as long as it's in moderation, and it's like, as long as you kind of do this, you feel good about yourself. It's a way of affirming yourself, like, yeah, I'm on the right path. And a lot of it has nothing to do with reality, obviously. And a lot of it has, even if you were to assume that there was a real God and a real Jesus, and, he was up there looking at you, even in that context, which it's bizarre as it is even put it that way, even in that context, it's not really real. Like, it's just a set of rules. If there was a God, I don't think he'd care about, well, you didn't drink beer this week, good for you, we're in a good relationship. Like that's the way a lot of people, like, it builds them up, and like, oh, I can check off 10 boxes. I and I opened my Bible today, so I did my devotion, so I got an extra, few brownie points, so I'm good. And it's like a way of kind of stemming the hurt of, I don't feel good about myself, especially in the theological context of, you're a bad person, bad. You're born in sin, you're a sinner, you're worthless, apart from God's grace. And it's like, if I can do these things, I feel really good. And it's like, it's almost like an OCD version. It's like, if I just do it exactly the same way and do these little rules, I'm happy with myself, and the world's okay. And
you see how religious rituals do that. There's just the same motion over and over again. And, it's a great business to be in, because they set up the pins and then they knock them down. They tell kids, you're bad, you're sinful. And then they create this anxiety in the kids. And then they get to say, well, here are these rituals. These are the magic words that you can say to get rid of, or to ameliorate that anxiety, to mitigate that fear. And then the cycle just starts up again in a really toxic way. I'll have to tell you, when I was 7 years old, 6 or 7, I think, is when they tell kids about Jesus being crucified on the cross. Up until that time, it's just puppy dogs and rabbits going up into the ark, and Adam and Eve and Jesus being a great guy. And right around 6 or 7, that's when things start getting dark. And I remember the instant that they went really in depth about Jesus being crucified on the cross. And I was a sensitive kid. But to tell you the truth, I'd have to ask you, and I'd have to ask the audience, what if you're 6 or 7 years old and you're being, told about the best person you ever knew, and guess what happened to him over, this period of time? It wasn't just it was like some kind of snuff porn, some kind of like addiction to violence that they're infecting children with. And I bawled my eyes out. I was inconsolable. They had to bring my mom in from choir practice for her to soothe me. And that's child abuse. I don't care where you're coming from. You're putting the fear and that kind of anxiety into a child, then that's child abuse.
Yeah. It's interesting that you use the word or the phrase snuff film. I've never thought about it before, but that really is an appropriate way to see it, obviously without the sexual side of it. But like, I've really been thinking through someone many months ago said this is really a death cult, Christianity. And of course, when you're in Christianity as a believer, you don't really think of it that way. And of course, if someone said something like, well, it's blood magic, the death cult thing, and it's a scapegoating religion, you're like, no, you're twisting verses, you're taking it out of context, you're messing it, or even like the sacrifice. God just loves blood. He loves the smell of burning flesh. Like, no, you're totally twisting it. And once you get out of it, you're like, you know what? It was a death cult. It was about blood magic. And you're like, why didn't I see that? But it helps you though, once you realize, you're like, that's how the people on the inside, they still can't see that that's how ridiculous it is. And it helps you to think through their thought process.
There's no bottom to our cognitive fallacies. People think, and there's a colloquial way of saying this, there's no bottom to stupid.
Yeah.
or to wackiness. I don't know if I told you the story when you were on my channel, but I went to the Holocaust Museum down in DC. This is years ago when it first opened up. And very powerful experience. Very powerful experience. I was moved by it. But just like every other museum, you get pooped out into the gift store. Mm-hmm. Right? So after going through all of the horrors of genocide and of the Holocaust, I'm in the gift shop at the Holocaust Museum, and what do I see? What do I see on the top shelf, prominently displayed? But a child's Noah's Ark toy in a big box. And I'm going, am I the only person here who sees this? Yeah, in a genocide, a Holocaust museum, and you have a toy pretty much celebrating genocide.
It's mind-boggling.
It boggles the brain. Yeah. I actually took a picture of it just to show friends when I got home. It's like, no, I'm not making this up. This is exactly what happened.
A parallel that I've seen recently that it's been boggling my mind is I see a lot of Christians, and non-Christians too, but I'm just going to pick on Christians here, but I see Christians who are very focused on trying to help people that are in bad situations, like the single moms, yeah. Women that would be contemplating an abortion, but they otherwise be willing to take the baby. It's just they're in a bad spot, and one of the hardest spots is when you've got somebody that's being beat up, maybe their boyfriend or something's beating them up, and this idea that there's some people who just their personality lets that stuff go on. They'll let someone literally just abuse them. And you see these people, Christians and non-Christians, very, very appropriately saying, we can help you. You need to get out. This is bad. If you can't see it, we'll help you think through it, but you deserve to be treated right. And as good as that is, that's a great message, and it's a great thing to help people in those horrible situations. You're like, okay, so can you not see that is exactly what you're in with this psychopathic God character? He loves you unconditionally, but if you don't obey him exactly the way he says and love him back, he will burn you in hell. And you're worth anything only if he declares you worthy. If he says, you didn't come to me the right way, you're back to being unworthy. And it's like, how abusive is that? As you said, especially to a kid. And it's like, but they can't see it. And it's the blindness and the blindfold issue is it's become a major, like the psychology behind it has become a major concern for me. Is like, how do you help someone see this? I don't have the answers for sure, but it's something that I want to work on thinking through. But wait, to go back to your story, we didn't get yet to the point where we talk about whether or not you actually placed your faith in Jesus. Was there a point where you said, yes, I'm...
Well, no true Baptist story would be complete without baptism, right?
Yes. And an altar call too.
You got to hear it. You got, it's like, wow, it's that time. I feel like I'm ready to amp my Jesus game to a whole nother level. And so, we had a very good minister at the time, a very humanist kind of person, though. I still wonder how he was able to square that circle about how he was able to make sense of it all. But he was. It's like Sam Harris says, it's like we have our brains and there's just these little drawers that you just put crazy stuff in, and there's like reasonable stuff right next to it.
Yeah.
I took a couple of classes with him, sat down with him for a good amount of time, went over what Jesus was all about, God was all about, the universe, everything. And I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I want to be born again. I want it. I want everyone to see it. This is my time. This is the right thing. And, for people who are born within a secular house, it's difficult to explain really what these ecstatic emotional moments are like.
Yeah.
Because that's what they are. There is this kind of opening up, this kind of emotional revelation, right, to religious experiences. And definitely, I was feeling it coming, being thrust into the water and then being pulled out of it. Talk about a cathartic moment.
Yeah.
It was pretty incredible.
The actual baptism itself, you mean?
Yeah, the baptism itself. And I was in it. I talked about this a couple of different times on different shows, not often though, about how I gave up masturbation for Jesus too. I was maybe, I was an age where a boy liked to be handsy with himself. Maybe it was 12 or 13 or so. And I went to Camp Rumney, which was like a ski camp for Christians up in New Hampshire, as I recall. The whole church group went up there with my sister. And, at the end, so I would never ski because of the disability, right? So I would just be happily in my tube going down. I could handle gravity being in a tube, that I could handle without a problem. And not thinking about hot girls that were there in their suits and stuff like that. I was, all of that. So at the end of our time there, of course, there was the whole, come on up and give your life to Jesus, or give something up to Jesus. Even if you're a believer at that point, is there something in your life that's preventing you or holding you back from being the best Christian you could be? And I said, well, obviously it's masturbation. So I'm going to go up there and give up masturbation for Jesus. Now, thank my fictitious God, they did not ask me to say the thing out loud, what I was giving up.
Yep.
Our secret shame was our secret shame. So I would imagine all the other kids there my age, boys up there my age, were like, are you here for wanking? Because I'm just assuming most of us here are for wanking, to tell you the truth. So I gave my life up for Jesus. And then shortly afterwards, I gave up masturbation. And this is the principle, right? One bad decision typically brings about another bad decision. That's just basic life.
Yeah.
So my poor decision for accepting Jesus, getting baptized, directly led into this giving up masturbation for the Lord. So after the ceremony was over, I went back to my seat. I was sitting right there, one of my many instances of awkward moments there with my sister. And she's like, well, Andy, because I was a good one in the family. I was the good one. I had that whole lot of lunatics that I was with, my mom, my dad, my sister. I was the most rash. I was the best pick of a bad lot there. And so my sister turns to me and she goes, so what did you give up to Jesus? What did you have to give up? It's like, oh, I'm not telling you that. I am, lips are sealed with that one. So you may ask me how long I was able to hold it together for. And that's a very valid question. With a lot of Christians, and I went down a path, I think a lot of people who want to do well and how they stop meeting those goals or working towards those goals. At first, you kind of start saying to yourself, all right, well, you run into the wall of saying to yourself, well, it's obviously that I'm going to wank. There is no way I can stop doing this. So then you start setting up rules. You try to set up safe zones so that you only do it at this particular time, on this particular day, and that's your wanking for the week, for the whole week, and that's fine. And you're thinking,
you had a whole system going. Wow.
Well, of course, because you want to stay truthful for Jesus without touching yourself inappropriately. And then, well, after that little spot, that one day a week for that specific time of wanking, well, then that started growing and metastasizing into other days. And then eventually it just became, all right, well, now I just can't masturbate on Sundays. As long as I don't masturbate on Sundays.
The Sabbath, yeah.
Of course, because if there was a day that Jesus didn't want you to masturbate, it would be on his day.
Yeah. If you watch Chariots of Fire, you know, Sabbath, you don't run and you don't masturbate.
Exactly. So, and then of course that was the last wall to fall. So that's my giving up masturbation for Jesus story.
So this is probably an obvious question, but I'm assuming that whole dynamic led to the shame culture issue, you know, where you were constantly feeling, I'm assuming, like you were disappointing this pretend God, and that you were constantly in a cycle of, I repent, okay, we're good, I'm at peace with God again, I'm, you know, obeying him, I'm protecting my thought life, I'm doing my devotions, whoops, I messed up, I'm bad again. And like,
right.
How long did that kind of thing go on, and what was that like for you?
Well, it was, you know, I had anxiety dreams. I was about sex. I was reincarnated as a shark. You know, I don't know why God decided to make me a shark in my next life. I guess it was because of wanking, of course. And when you have flippers, you really can't do any of that.
Yeah. Hey, it's karma, man. You deserved it.
Exactly. I deserved it in that weird Hinduistic trans-life migration Christian way that God has. I don't know. So I had some anxiety dreams about it. And, you know, I don't want to bury the lead here. We've been talking for a while. But it turns out that I'm not 100% straight. And that was also something that ran afoul with my Christianity. And I would say if there is one of the most toxic effects of faith or these dysfunctional institutions, it's turning yourself against yourself, dividing who you are and making part of you just like repress and selling it down the road and abuse in a lot of ways. So it turns out that I'm bisexual. Some people would call pansexual. And that was something I also had to wrestle with. And I didn't really come to grips with it until I was in my early 20s. Well, when I stopped being a conservative Christian, well after I was done with being even a liberal Christian, I was somewhat floating around in agnosticism. But even then, there were barriers that Christianity had set up in me from an early age that prevented me from being a whole sexual person.
Yeah.
I cannot explain. You know, so when people tell me, when Christians come to me, or when I talk with them, I try to be mindful of those things that I have felt in that, and how long my journey was to get out.
Yeah.
And so that at least tempers a lot of my quick reactions. Of course, people too. You know, I mean, I'm not as fast as I used to be anyway in terms of responses, but.
Yeah, I love the way you phrased it. I forget the exact wording, but just the idea of the religion's turning people against themselves. What a great perspective! And it really is. It's true. It's hitting the nail right on the head. You are, if you realize, and you know, hopefully a lot of our listeners already did realize this or will, that the God you're thinking of or we're thinking of is pretend. It's mythological. Then your ability to beat yourself up over these supposed quote unquote sins is literally just a mind game. And so as you beat yourself for this and you feel so ashamed and dark and bad inside, you are doing it in the sense, in this court, you know, this mental, you know, the court of God, where God is, you know, hammering his whatever grovel down and saying, you know, bad, bad, bad. You're doing it all in your brain, and it's not actually happening. It's not real. It's just, it's make believe, it's fake believe, and it's very sad. Well, can I ask on that note, and I want to go back to the whole deconversion a little bit clearer, but the one last question about that. Did you ever have people use that part of your story as a way to say, see, you just wanted to sin, that's why you walked away from God?
Yeah, people have said all kinds of crazy things.
What do you say to people when you, I mean, not, you know, in a public thing, but it's like when people chat honestly, where they're like, I really want to know, like, I'm not here to attack you, but just honestly, did you walk away from God because you just wanted to sin and you just couldn't deal with his rule book?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I walked away from God from all the reasons, you know, I know it's just going through. Well, if it's someone I don't know and what I don't want to do, and this is just tactics, I don't want to give them the laundry list of reasons why I gave up. and I try to connect with them, and then I might say something like, well, I just became unafraid of exploring the idea of there not being a God.
Yeah.
And like I said, just trying to create this cognitive, affective space that they can, that hope that they could kind of like explore too.
Yeah. That's a good way to start, because a lot of people, that alone is, that just conceiving of it is hard. It's almost blasphemous, really, to even pretend it.
And then the thing is, how I interact online and how I am in person, you know, there are different modes. So what works, I feel, online with being a bit more, especially with the blog and some of the YouTube videos and some comedy stuff, you know, being brash, and getting into people's faces about some things, you know, that just gets more attention and reaches a wider audience. While when I'm actually talking with people, I am much more like this. I'm much more, well, have you thought about this? And try to shepherd them.
Shepherd the sheep.
As against to try, because this is the problem with our side, I think. We try to fact fuck people.
Yeah.
And fact fucking people does not work. Yeah. It may help other atheists and other people who are already on their journey to solidify and to help them be better at what they do. But in terms of someone who is a believer, you know, I'm not saying you can't throw facts out there, but you just can't do the laundry list and fact fuck them, because they're just gonna think you're a jerk. They're just gonna think you're a jerk.
Yeah, agreed. So was there a specific day that you would say, I admitted I wasn't a Christian anymore, or was it just like a very slow, gradual thing?
It was a slow and gradual thing, definitely. It was like that old Seinfeld bit about tipping the vending machine over and over again and comparing that to a human relationship, with a relationship with your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend. It takes several tries. You have to rock it back and forth. So there are definitely types that I went in and out of faith. I went from being conservative to liberal to conservative. And you know, it's a struggle. That's what it is. It's a struggle, especially when you're doing it on your own.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to navigate all this other stuff that's going on in your life, but you're also trying to figure out who you are in the world and how the world actually works. Because you know, this conservative Christianity will mess up your head about how the actual world works too. There is this whole not understanding of cause and effect in a lot of ways, and this kind of magical thinking, which is really can screw up people's lives.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, what I will say this is that I became an activist. I became a blogger with the birth of my children, because, and I'm sure you've seen this with other people, when you have children, there seems to be this instinctual drive to get more serious about life.
Yeah.
And so for me, so people who may be just casually religious become more religious. For me, I was an atheist at the time, I became more, and this of course happened around 9/11 too. You know, my ex-wife was pregnant with our first during 9/11, during that burst of new atheism. And that really resonated with me. And it was a time and a place. And I'm like, wow, not only am I a non-believer, but now I see and understand and have made an emotional leap there, or not even a leap, but I wrapped my heart around it too, as well as my mind, about how toxic religion is. And I have the birth of my children to thank for it. Yeah.
It seems like 9/11 really impacted a lot of people. I was speaking with Mike Lawrence, you might know. He's wrote the book 70 over in the UK, and he was already out. I think he pretty much grew up without being a Christian, which was cool. But 9/11 just compelled him to really dig deeper into this and to try to help other people to think through it. I was curious with, like, even though there wasn't a day, like for me, I think I shared with you, there was a day. But for you as a process, was there still any time in which you kind of, you know, say you're just busy and, you know, you're not really having time to think for yourself by yourself, but then at some point kind of, you know, everybody's out of the house and you're just kind of sitting there, you know, whatever, I'm just making this up, but you're looking out at the trees, thinking about profound things, not masturbating, just thinking about, just thinking about, you know, the earth, the world, the universe, reality. And did it ever just hit you, like, to say the words to yourself, like, I think I'm an atheist. I don't think this is real. Like, did that come across that
There
way?
were there were times that I was exposed, that I was confronted with certain dogmatic beliefs.
Okay.
And maybe I didn't think that it was complete bullshit up until I actually started saying the words out of my mouth. And it's like, wow, I am right. This is just bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, finding out that my penis seems to like men and women, that was an epiphany of itself. And then, as a person who was telling people just like years earlier than that, that they were going to hell for homosexuality, that was just like a little box, a little light flashing on. It's like, oh, that and this and this, just drawing the lines, which you would think would be obvious. You would think it would be obvious. But because you're in the middle of your own drama, of your own play, you can't see outside of yourself. And that's like, oh, this is what the faith does to people right here.
Hmm.
That was, yeah. And that was kind of unfolded in front of me too. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
I'll admit, I've only been out of Christianity for 14 months, I guess it is at this point. It's a hard issue for Christians to deal with. I mean, it really is. It still has, you can feel the tentacles of just how, well, especially when you're in it for decades and decades, where you're taught to think a certain way, and it's like you have to, unschool yourself, take away that programming, and it's hard. But it's been good from my side to try to begin to think through. Fortunately, I never said anything damaging to people that were homosexual, which is good. And a lot of Christians that did and would, but it's like to step back, like you said, out of the play, of your life, and to say, there are people who are in so much pain, and all we're doing is adding to it, and we're not even aware of their story, their struggles, and we're being so not just passive, but actively, aggressively mean to people, and trying to basically bury them alive in this whole thing. And it's been an eye-opener for me, and it's something that I feel like I'm just starting to really think through how to be more sensitive, and how to be more gracious in these conversations, because it's something that, at least for not every branch of Christianity, but a lot of them, stuff like homosexuality is just pure, straight from the devil. It's obviously a distortion. And especially in the context when you link it with reproduction, although it's for pleasure, it's obviously sex is obviously for pleasure, but it's also for reproduction. It's for having children, and obviously that's a little difficult to do when you're in a homosexual environment. So it's like, when you're a Christian and the only thing that you want to do is have more babies to make little soldiers for Christ, it's like it's obvious, and it's obvious, and it's obvious that this is wrong. And it's like, when you finally step out of it, you're like, wow, I was in a worldview that's so mean. Just it's nasty mean. And it's been a learning process for me.
You know what I just figured out the other day is that the more people use that term, survival of the fittest, like, so you're hanging out with someone, they're just using this term a lot, there is a positive correlation between the amount of times that person uses that term and the likelihood that they don't understand what that term means. That's what I think. And you just, and it's an effect of Christianity, right? It is this effect that not really understanding the science, or not really caring to look at the science, and it just creates these barriers between a Christian becoming a non-Christian. Yeah, especially with like this homosexuality thing and survival of the fittest. It's like, I don't think, if you understand what the term means, and if you understand basic stuff about evolution 101, it is, or about how animal behavior works, right? And so all of a sudden you blow their mind. You don't blow their minds, but it's another third rail issue about people are animals, and when you consider animal behavior and our behavior, there's a lot of overlap, and one of them is about what we do with our genitals.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. And I appreciate you being willing to share some of your background and your story with that. And I just we need people like you to help us who have escaped to rethink these issues.
Well, Tim, what I try to do is that I try to make my story palatable, because you hear a lot of comedians who just start talking their stories and they have not been able to figure out how to round out those edges.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not here for a pity party at all. I'm here to entertain people, to share my story, and to hope that someone somewhere is able to take something from it and find it useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going to actually, it's a good segue. I was going to have us wrap up with this subject of comedy. I'm curious how someone like yourself, who's got more of a sense of humor than the rest of us, and I certainly enjoy comedy, but I never feel like I've got the joke that, if someone said, "Tell us the best joke you've ever had," it would take me a while to come up with anything. Right. But someone like you, I imagine, has a whole list of them. But just in terms of that comedy side, and I'm thinking in my mind of Pine Creek Doug. I'm sure you know him. There is a sense in which some of the ways that people escape Christianity, and this wasn't as much my path, but I've seen other people have this, where the ability to step back from your story, from your play of Christianity, so to speak, and to just laugh at yourself and just see the comedy of this, it helps people. And it's, again, I know it's kind of blasphemous to some people. You need to be, somber and serious about the Lord and spiritual things. But when you step back and you just say, whether you're looking at something like how the canon was formed and the craziness of the church councils, whether you're talking about even stuff like really deep stuff like, astrotheology and mystery cults, or if you're just doing a very simple glance of the biblical stories, you're not really studying anything outside the Bible. You're just saying, let's just look at the stories, like, the crazy stories you mentioned, Noah and the flood, afterwards, Noah with his sons, and he, curses one because of exposing the nakedness, Lot and his two daughters, Joshua and, the genocide. And you're just like, at some point, some people, I think, do get helped by somebody like yourself or Pine Creek or whatever, saying, do you not realize how silly this sounds? And I wanted to ask you, just how do you use that? Obviously not in a mean way, like, hey, you're stupid, get out of Christianity, but just like, how do you help people to say, there's a different way to think about it? Can I offer you my perspective, but in a humorous way?
I've done blog posts about evangelicals protesting space, protesting the theory of gravity, bits about, Christian becomes an atheist and then becomes a serial killer. Working on tropes, working on these bits that Christian culture, evangelical culture has, and turning them upside down or playing around with them. And once you start playing around the absurdity, the reductio ad absurdum aspect of it, you take the dogma and then you take it to its most extreme part. Then you say, wow, that is kind of funny and absurd. I wrote this story for a book called Not Seeing God in the 21st Century. It was a bunch of us Patheos bloggers got together and we just wrote about, our experiences. And I just wrote this, it was a rather longish short story about Cain and Abel. And, I played around with ideas like incest, with family meetings and calendars and schedules, because there's only one woman in the world. And so, you got to have a procreation schedule, and what the real beef was between Cain and Abel. And so, you play around with these tropes and these ideas, and that helps people to think about things in a different way. And as soon as you start thinking about things in a different way, you're on the road to blasphemy and deconversion for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've been seeing. Is all it takes is a spark. It's kind of like one of the biggest sparks is the issue of inerrancy. Like once you crack open the door and say, well, maybe the dead people that rose and walked around Jerusalem after Jesus died, walked around, everybody saw him. Maybe that was allegory or mythology. Maybe it was made up. And like you just, or maybe, when you even look at something like, well, the end of this gospel, it isn't there in the earliest manuscripts or whatever. And it's like, you can start to go endlessly down those examples. There's a lot of them. But if you take just a couple of the really serious ones, especially ones like, in 1 John, where the issue of the Trinity it's not there in the earliest manuscripts, you're like, whoa, wow, this is serious stuff. The earliest versions of Christianity didn't have these very important verses. It's like the door just cracked. And once you crack it open once to say either we don't really know that this is the Bible, maybe there's if you still wanted to try to cling to a God, maybe there's a real Bible you need to get back to. And then once you add to it the discussions about, well, there's more gospels, there's other people, like if you just look at the Catholics, the Catholics have other books in their Bible. Why is that? Why does some of them apologetically and defensively totally say this is actually the word of God? So many routes you could take, but once you just crack it open a little bit, it's like, okay, I can't really defend my religion. On that note, do you get much pushback from family? Either originally or now for being an atheist?
The people who know me, I have to tell you, I have developed a good crew of people around me. I've made a choice not to be around toxic people, and I have carved a life. I have crafted a life for myself where it isn't an echo chamber, but you're either on Team Andy. You can even be like agnostic about Team Andy, right? You just can't be anti-Team Andy, because I think having people around you that are anti-team you got to ask yourself, is this really worth your problems? So my dad's passed on, and we did not have a good relationship. My mom is about, I don't have a great relationship with her. And I have to tell you something. It's about having children too. Do I want my children exposed to them? Because it isn't just the religiosity that's the issue. It's all this other crazy stuff that they are harboring in them. And I wanted it to end with me, Tim. I wanted it to end with me in terms of the outright insanity. I got my issues, don't get me wrong. I'm a lunatic. Just go back and watch this tape. You'll see that I'm a lunatic. But I'm not that kind of lunatic. I'm not someone who is preaching out evil or harm. And I just want to make people laugh and think at the same time, basically. So the folks around me, I got a great crew of people. And if anyone who is not a believer watching this, probably one of the best things you can do is to find a group of people who support you for who you are.
Awesome. I love how you said that it ends with you. I've thought that so much too. It's like, even like in the big picture, like the grand scheme of thing, like when is this mythology of Christianity going to end on this planet? When will it go the way of, Zeus and Thor? And
right.
It's like you hope for it. It's not going to happen in our generation or even in a couple more, but give it 1,000 years, hopefully a lot less, but give it 1,000 years. Hopefully it's much, much, much more dead by then. But
what's interesting is this artifact that I have in my head from my days of believing, because I just think of that Jesus line about plucking out my eye or cutting out my, if it sins against me, I'm just going to sacrifice that. And it's crazy thinking. That's what it is. But at times there's some truth in that. So I'm willing to sever off or to free myself. And it's not really, maybe, I always thought of it like this too. When people talk about losing your religion, it's more about really finding my car keys. It's really about knowing things and being comfortable. So it isn't this great existential hole that you fall into. It's more about being the real you, living your life in a real way.
Yeah, agreed. I honestly hope I hope a lot that some of the stuff does end in the next generation or two. Obviously I do, but it's just you feel for, going back to the children, we talked about that a couple of times, but you feel for kids, and it burdens me that there are people that literally live their whole lives, and Neo in the Matrix, when he's saying, why do my eyes hurt? And Morpheus like, oh, you never used me before. It's like you've never actually lived. Like you've never looked up at the stars at night, and like all you can do, like this, it amazes me. You look up at the stars at night, especially on a really clear night, especially if you're out where there's not too many lights. And like it is so amazing. Or even if you're just on your computer watching a YouTube video about, Hubble's pictures and stuff. Like this is so mesmerizing. It's humbling. You're so small and the universe is so big and it's so amazing. And it's like the only thing that these people, meaning people that I used to be, so I'm not, saying this against them, but just I used to be one of them. The only thing that these people that are so blinded can think of is this God who made all this beautiful stuff. When he first spoke to this little blue planet, this little blue dot, all he could do was say, I'm not going to talk to all of you. I'm going to talk to one little teeny snippet of a little tribe. I'm going to do it at a time in your history when you're savage and when you're not really using, you're barely developing an alphabet. There's other people that have developed an alphabet more on the other side of the planet, but I'm going to let them go. I'm going to talk to you all who don't have one. And some of the first things I'm going to say to you are, go kill your neighbors, but save the little girls for yourselves, right, and steal their land. Stone people that pick up sticks on the Sabbath, and cut off the end of your little boy's peckers. It's like, that's your God. When you look up at the stars, that's what you're thinking of as that character. And then you add to it, of course, the blood magic, the scapegoat, and you're like, what a sick, like, you've never actually just looked at the stars and said, wow, and stopped there. Like, it's always, wow, my Yahweh, well, how wonderful. And it's like, come on, like, let's hit the reset button, start life over. Let's look at those stars again with fresh eyes. It's totally different, and it's an amazing experience when you are on the other side. It's so cool to look at the stars now.
Fair enough.
What would you say is we keep talking about children, what would you say is your best way that you would advise atheist parents to try to help their children have a healthy shot at reality?
I am blunt with my kids. I've always talked to them in an age-appropriate way, but I've been truthful with them. God is an imaginary character. He's an imaginary friend that a lot of people have. They don't realize he's imaginary, so you cannot tell them he is imaginary because they might get mad at you. So that's my basic godless prime directive in terms of parenting. And it's worked out okay, for me and for my kids. I know there's a lot of secular parents out there who want to just have their kids figure it out on their own. And it's like, maybe if we weren't living in the United States of America, but
Yeah.
I don't want to give away the plot here of our country, but we're in a secular versus evangelical conflict here. And if the evangelicals can get their hands on the minds of your children, then they will. And to tell you the truth, I didn't lie to my kids. I just told them exactly what's what. There is a dangerous meme out there. I didn't use that language, but there is a dangerous meme out there, and I want to inoculate them as quickly and as powerfully as possible.
Yeah, good thoughts. What is with your comedy? What's your favorite skit to do, or what's your favorite subject?
I just like talking about salsa and mayonnaise sandwiches, and I like talking about being adopted and all the awkwardness that came out with that, and making religious jokes. The thing is, as an artist, and you can always start rolling your eyes back whenever a comedian starts talking about the art of the craft. It's like, no one wants to hear a comedian talk. I mean, unless there are other comedians, right? And then I'll say this: it's like I am exploring, or I have explored over the 4 years, the insanity of Donald J. Trump and his criminal family, and their relationship with evangelicals, and the oligarchs that run America. So that sounds like a mouthful, but in all reality, it just comes out in funny little pieces on my blog, Laughing in Disbelief. And to tell you the truth, I'm just working on the medium so much online is the message, and that you have to figure out what works for comedy on different social media platforms. So I've just been doing these quick 1-minute videos, comedy videos on YouTube, because YouTube is pushing them right now. And I'm like, all right, I'll rack up some hours. I might get some new subscribers for just doing really stupid, but hopefully funny comedy videos on my channel. So it's been exploring that too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I'm going to end with asking you a question. It was a good question that you asked me at the very end of our YouTube interview a couple weeks ago. And it was like a think quick on your feet thing. So I'm going to do it back to you. I'm going to twist it a little bit, but what's something that people don't know about you that you don't really talk about it all, like this, something that no one knows about you at all that you've ever shared in a video. Something really unique that you'd have to be in your super inner circle to know about Andy.
Geez, that's a good question. And my girlfriend could probably answer that. Or my hide the body friend. I've had, every person has a crew of people around them. And one of my guys is a close friend I've had for well over 30 years. He's my hide the body guy. He's my guy that I can call up at like 2:00 in the morning and tell him there has to be a body to be hidden. And he wouldn't even ask why. He would just be, I'll bring the hefty bags and the scotch tape or the duct tape and this. So they would probably be able to answer that pretty well. For me, and this is just a trick, by the way, that comedians do, just so that we give ourselves a chance to actually think about the answer and we just like spout off words. What people don't know about me, it is I'm a big Guys and Dolls is my favorite musical of all time. Even the Marlon Brando version of it. My girlfriend had never seen the Marlon Brando version of Guys and Dolls, but it was just happened to be on TV. We were cruising around, I think Netflix or Hulu. It's like, have you ever seen this version of Guys and Dolls? Marlon Brando sings. Maybe not well, but you got like Frank Sinatra in it, and it's got these great songs, and it's beautiful, and it's my favorite musical of all time because I hate Grease. I hate the musical Grease. I hate the movie. I feel like Guys and Dolls and Grease are diametrically opposed. And so, yes, I would say right now, Guys and Dolls is my favorite musical of all time.
Gotcha. And I know you're a sci-fi person, at least.
And I break out in song too, randomly. I'll just be walking around the house and I'll just break out in song.
That's awesome. Are you more of a Star Trek or a Star Wars person?
Well, they're two. I'm not the first person to say it. They are far different genres. One is space magic, and one is a thoughtful reflection on how people live together. So I'd say my brain is definitely more Star Trek, about how people can live together and make it work, while my heart belongs to space magic and lightsabers.
Yeah.
But
Mythology.
Yeah, that's what I would say right off the top of my head.
Yeah, good answers. Well, Andy, this has been awesome. Is there anything else that I didn't ask that you wanted to add?
No, man. I think we covered a lot.
We did cover a lot quick. Well, thank you so much again, everyone. Andrew Hall, thank you so much for joining us. I'll have all the links for Andy. I can call you Andy, right?
You can call me whatever you want as long as it's not derogatory.
Absolutely. I'll have Andy's links for his blog, Laughing at Disbelief, for his YouTube channel, and also a link for his Amazon book as well, but also he sells shirts and hoodies and stuff with interesting messages. What's that about, by the way?
I try to challenge people in a variety of different ways. And some of them, it's radical ideas like wearing a t-shirt that says like choose science, or basically supporting the light side of the force, if we're going to go into that Star Wars kind of metaphor, about supporting that which needs to be supported in our society. Lighting candles, because I just don't shout at the darkness. I do light candles on occasion.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Well, I'll have all those links below the video. Andy, thank you. It's been awesome. I love your channel. I love your blog. I love talking with you, and just thank you for what you're doing. You're doing an awesome job, and keep at it, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Thanks. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for asking me to come on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andy. Have a great day.
Thanks.